Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Maryland Online's webinar series. The first one for 2021 is today, and it is entitled, I Wanted to Take This Course in the Classroom, Part 1, Giving the Power of Choice Back to the Unhappy Student. Deb Dorsey, who is the Assistant Professor of Health at Harford Community College, has been studying this very timely topic to which we can all relate. And if you are interested, Deb will be doing a part 2 webinar on this topic in June, and she will give you more details on that. Please remain muted and type your questions in the chat, and we will get to them throughout at various points along the way. And with that, I will turn it over to Deb.
All right, so thank you all for stopping by. Today, as Wendy said, I'm going to talk a little bit about some strategies that you can use, but also I'm going to give you some examples of what I did this past fall semester. Of course, probably everybody in the space right now had that switch to remote. And we all scrambled, of course, to get our courses ready. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. And then if you are typing some things into the chat and I don't immediately respond to you, don't worry. I will take a look at them towards the end. And I'm very informal in the way that I do webinars. If you have a question, you can interrupt me at any given time. And you can do it just, sort of by unmuting yourself. And I'm totally okay with that. It's nice when we can have real-time questions. If you're like me, I'll have a question, and unless I don't ask it in the moment, then it's gone within 30 seconds. So the other thing that I'll tell you is I'm going to turn my camera off so that you can't see me. I have been told that I am a gesturer and animated, and so I tend to be a bit of a distraction if I keep my camera on. So. All right, so I wanted to take this course in the classroom, and what we're talking about here is giving some power of choice back to the unhappy student, because of course we know that we do have students who preferred to take our courses in the classroom. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, who they probably are, and there we go. And so in terms of learning environment preferences. I'll also talk a little bit about personal learning environment, and what I'm doing is setting the stage for some of the rationale as to why I brought my public health course into this very, very open way of teaching. I'll give you some examples, and this Intro to Public course was a remote course, meaning at scheduled times, just as we would meet in the classroom, we were instead meeting virtually at those, so it was synchronous and at very scheduled times. Now, for those of you who are teaching a different subject matter, I think that doing this is very transferable, particularly in courses where you may have had a lab component, or where data is somewhat central to your subject matter. So I'm going to come back and talk a little bit about that as well. So first, learning environment preferences, and this was a 2018 EDUCAUSE survey, and they have the ECAR, which stands for Center for Applied Research. And so this was, you can see, a variety of different institutions. Of course, I'm always interested in the first column, which is your Associate of Arts, and that's going to be your community college, because I teach at a community college. And so when we look at this was 130 United States institutions, and it was about 64,000, that's a big difference, isn't it, students. And what they asked was, what is your preference? What I thought, actually, just as a side note, was interesting was that bachelor 4-year private schools, they really wanted completely face-to-face. And so, as you might sort of guess, in a community college, that there were some students that wanted completely online, and that's just our demographic. We have students that are working full-time, and online meets their their personal needs. But again, across the line, we're seeing that more students want completely face-to-face. And my question is always, why? And we're going to get at that in just a minute. So the one that is more recent, that was put on, same thing, this is EDUCAUSE, and this is 2019. There was about 40,000 students this time, and about a little over 10% were community college students. So important to point out, if you're a data person, it was a little bit of a smaller group that answered these questions, but I think it's still relevant. And you can kind of see that it works on a continuum of completely face-to-face to completely online. And what I really want to point out is sort of that end, those last couple of factors there, that, what are they interested in? What do they want to do in the classroom? And, they're no surprise, lab demonstrations, they really want that in face-to-face. But the sort of the ones that I was interested in was more, the asking questions, the presentations, the lectures, and faculty to student conferences. This is sort of an interesting one to me, because it was like, all right, well, what I'm seeing in this is that they want one-to-one. And so is there a way that I can, recreate that in the context of our course time? And so one of the things, of course, that's an issue for those of us that teach at community colleges that we're always, keenly aware of, is retention and completion. And so, as we started to go into the fall semester, and we knew it's going to be all online, some of it, may be completely online, some of it might be remote. What are we going to do about these students who just really feel like they would rather take a course online? And I think it goes back to this. What I see here in this graph is I am unsure about what to do. And so I always look at this as the student who has personally labeled themselves, I am not good at this subject. And a lot of times we know that that's math and science. They're not exclusively, of course. We do have some students who say, I'm not good at writing. I have some, reading comprehension issues. In the case of public health, it's the math part and to a degree science. And so that in that class, it's 108, it's a 100 level course. And so though it's interesting, though it's an intro class, it's broad. And we cover a lot. And a lot of what we cover is math and science. And so I know, all right, just logically, if this is the kind of student who is likely to have wanted to be in class for these reasons, what am I going to do about that? The other key thing here is the word forced. This was against my will. I did not want to do this course online. And that just by itself, there's feelings about that, right? And we know as educators that the way a student feels has a big impact on learning, their interest in the subject matter. And so this was a 2020 Lumina Foundation and Gallup partnered. It was a little over 2,000 students, and they were all, the ones that I'm going to show you here, all pursuing an associate degree. And so dissatisfaction was highest among the students who said, I was forced to do this. In normal circumstances, I would take this in a face-to-face setting. And in my discipline, the part that was very concerning was the well-being of the student. And so, what they found was that the well-being and the quality of the student experience were lowest among those who transferred from, almost all of the courses that they took were in person to completely online. So we've got a couple things going here. One is that we potentially have the student who has identified themselves as not good at this subject. We know that part of it is that their concern is being able to, ask questions, hear the lectures, complete real-time assignments. And so my question was, all right, well, what am I going to do about this? And I kept returning back to the word control. Now, Personal learning environment. This is Graham Atwell, who is from the University of Warwick. And he also has a company that I will kill the name of it. I think it's Ponte Dice. I don't know. It is challenging, but it's basically a small research company. And he defines the personal learning environment as being something where the student can set their own goals. Now, of course, this is with the support of their teachers. They can manage their learning. And the key word here, anytime I bold font, that's like, this is important. So it's not only the process, but content. And I think that this is the part where we as educators get a little nervous. How much freedom of pursuing content are we willing to give to our students? And of course, it's the ability to communicate with others, whether that's other students or the instructor during the process of learning. And, this probably sounds a lot like the flipped classroom. We're sort of familiar with this, where students do a little bit of work on their own, and then the time is spent being a facilitator. But that's not exactly what I'm talking about here. I am talking about really opening up and not being prescriptive about what kind of work that student accomplishes. And you're going to hear me use that word a lot, prescriptive, meaning we decide what the assignment is, we decide what the topic is, we are very prescriptive in how we teach our courses. Now, in self-directed learning, this is not a revolutionary concept. 1975, I believe her name was Knowles, and talked about what self-directed learning is. And there's several strategies there's several factors there that she identified. But the one that really stands out to me is identifying human and material sources for learning. And the reason why I think that this really stands out to me is we have students who it's very difficult for them to find what they need in terms of information resources. What is a reliable source of information? What is a credible? How do I find out what I need to be successful in completing an assignment, learning a subject? And I felt like this really did fit public health. And the other part of this is, though my public health course is not a general education course, I still really look at our general education objectives when I structure my course. And one of the ones at Harford is define information needs, access information efficiently and effectively, evaluate information critically, and use information ethically. Well, that fits public health to a T, but it also sort of corresponds with, I'm going to backtrack a little bit right here, what do they want? Asking questions, what do they want to know from me when we look at what they're going to do in the course? So public health, it has a couple different learning objectives, the course does. And these were the two that I'm going to kind of give you some examples about. And one is recognizing and evaluating research tools. So we're talking about being able to utilize search engines and that sort of information. Do I have a question? I heard a mic open. Okay, maybe not. So, and there's the mathy words, analytical methods, and then the second part is the methods used to prevent, detect, and control disability, morbidity, and mortality in communities and at-risk populations. And what you're going to see is that this is going to come from the Healthy People 2020. That again, there's a whole lot of, at first glance, overwhelming sources of information that students, that we use as part of our curriculum. And so the other part of this is that in public health, it can kind of be a bit of a dry subject matter. And there is one specific piece of public health that it is somewhat dry, and that's epidemiology. So epidemiology, as defined, is the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related states of events in specific populations and the application of this study to control health problems. So when I read that, it kind of reads almost to me like one of those a train is traveling math equations. It's very verbose. And again, there's those mathy kind of terms. But the problem is you can't skip over epidemiology and public health. It's the cornerstone. It's the foundation of everything that follows. And so this was the other part that I said, all right, how are we gonna, here we have this student that, they did not want to be here in this remote learning environment. It's possible that they have math and science angst. What am I gonna do about this, particularly with epidemiology? Because it's a topic that just flows through the entire course. And so from the start, I said to them from the first class, this is really open-ended and the world is your oyster. And they were not super happy about that. Now, I did this graphic on purpose because you can see we all had that student where, when the cameras was on, we thought it was them. We could just see sort of like the top of their head. I had several of them that I would always have to say, hey, I want to see your shining face, even if it's just for 30 seconds. But the takeaway here in this graphic is they were not used to this kind of instruction. When I said to them, you're going to pick the things that you're interested in. You're going to guide what you look at in this course. And they were scared because they were very used to the traditional, structured, prescriptive way of learning. And so I'm going to give you some examples of this in just a second. But when we got to the places where it was looking at first glance at this very overwhelming sources of information, what I said to them was dig around in these websites, pick a topic. I was very broad. I didn't say, find an example of this. But as they were going through it, I wanted them to be thinking about why they picked what they picked. And I'm very patterned in the way that I teach courses, whether it's in the classroom or remote. And so what I did, and I used Zoom as my method of communicating virtually with students. And I would say to them, all right, I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms. You're going to dig around in these websites. And when we come back as a group, you're going to share with me that something you did not know. And of course, in class discussions, we would say, all right, we're going to talk about one thing. What did you not know? What do you know now that you'd like to know more about from digging around in these websites? And what did not keep your interest? And I think that this is a question that we don't always ask our students. What wasn't interesting to you? What was boring? And part of that reason is that 108 is a exploration course for the community health promotion degree. And part of this is trying to figure out if this is a subject that you're interested in, if this is something that you want to pursue. And so here, if I was very prescriptive and I said, find an example of this. Well, what if that example is something that a student is not even interested in? So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to show you some of these websites that I'm talking about. And chances are good when you first look at them, you're going to say, wow, that is a lot of information. So this is a surveillance resource center, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. They're like, for those of us teaching public health, they're our huge source of information. And it just so happened that unfortunately, good for public health course, not great for the world, was the COVID outbreak. And so what I said to them was, all right, you've got 20 minutes. I'm gonna put you in a breakout room. You're gonna just dig all around in here. Or if you would prefer, you can, go into here, because we were starting to talk a little bit about, diseases but just all of our topics. I mean, you can kind of see this is very broad. And so for me to say, all right, dig around, take a look. I mean, it can go everywhere. I dropped down for diabetes. There's all of these other, so it's like search engine that leads to another search engine that leads to another search engine. And of course, their eyes were very large when I said that. And they said, well, what specifically are you looking for? What are you looking for, statistics? You know, and I said, well, if you want to share some statistics that you found were interesting, rock on. But no, this is you just going into these websites and digging through information. You know, what are you interested in? What are some things that you found, wow, I didn't know about that. And so I want to know more. Again, these are somewhat overwhelming websites. And to make them, you know, feel like they had a sense of control over where they could navigate, that was what I was going for. And so I'm going to pull back here and go back. And then where that led to was, all right, now, you know, you feel a little bit more confident, in your ability to navigate these things. We came back in from our breakout rooms, everyone got to share. So now you're going to do this more on your own. You're going to go back into these two sites and I want you to find 3 things. So let's expand. And this is where I sort of needed to find that sweet spot between I have to cover these topics, and I also need to give these students a bit more control about what they go for. The other thing I said to them is, who would need this information? Who would use this? And so we're working towards looking at these different occupations, these different careers in public health. But you can see that had I used a more prescriptive traditional way of having them look at this, you know, go find this. This is usually, or go to this specific website. So I tell you, I want you to look specifically at bacterial diseases, this one, the active bacterial core surveillance. And I want you to, you know, these are the selections of pre-approved topics. And then probably would not have asked them, you know, what didn't keep your interest? And of course, it would also be like if I did and I wanted them to go and, you know, who would use this information, I might say, tell me how a health educator would use this information. So I would be telling them, you know, in that case, here's specifically what you need to tell me. But what if they don't want to be a health educator? What if they want to do something else in public health? So again, it was very broad and that was deliberate on my part. And so what I found was, and this was sort of prepping them for the dreaded research paper, right? We say research paper, we're going over our syllabus. Our students look at that and go, I don't know about taking this class. So we had to figure out a way. I had to figure out a way to make databases not scary. And then I needed for them to build their confidence in, I know how to find what I need. And I think that all of this, it was how we got to this point was, again, that control, that desire of what they wanted to know was restored. They, you know, the world was their oyster, like I said to them before. Now, a little bit about these individual breakout rooms. I find that they were very helpful in the remote in the virtual learning environment, because students sometimes are reluctant to ask questions in real time because they don't want to feel dumb. And the other part of this, if we go all the way back to, I was forced to take this course. It possibly that some of those feelings were based out of, I don't think I have the right kind of technology to be successful in this course. I may not have the Wi-Fi speed. I may not have the device. And I do not want to stick out, you know, in a class of other students who don't have these problems. Their Wi-Fi is great. Their computer is great. And so if I put you into an individual breakout room, and this is where, you know, we talked a little bit at the very beginning about that. They really wanted that one-to-one, the teacher to student. They called it conferences. I look at it as one-to-one. This gave them the time. This gave them, 3, 4, 5 minutes of my undivided time that they could ask me those questions that they would perhaps not have otherwise asked if we were just doing it as part of the larger group. So if you're teaching remote courses, I really encourage you to think a little bit about how you can bring this into your your time when you are in that specific scheduled class time. Because another way to look at this, of course, is to say, if you have questions, you can get in touch with me and we'll do a virtual office hour. But how many of them actually do that? How many of them actually follow through with that? In my experience, it has not been a lot. So you have to be here during this class time. You're here. Here's the time for me as you're working through these things that perhaps were somewhat scary to you, that I can rotate through and give you my undivided attention. But it also gets you familiar with, all right, I understand how this breakout room thing happens. I know what this looks like when it's just, Debbie and myself talking independently, and hopefully that would then perhaps lend to wanting or being okay with scheduling those virtual office hours, because now I know what it's going to look like. I know what to expect. And I did find that students were more, I wouldn't say that it was fantastic that they used these virtual office hours. I wish that some of them used them more, but they did use them too. Some students did use them to a certain extent. And a lot of times this was, based upon these sorts of feelings or worrying about feeling dumb, asking a question in the context of the larger group. And so the other thing that we look at in public health, a big part of this, a big part of the curriculum, is the social determinants of health. And there's these different categories, the 6 different categories, and there's a lot of subtopics within these different categories. And again, now we're gearing up for the research paper number 2. And so, going back to some of these websites, it's kind of the same thing. Here we have the social determinants of health. They're, what are the current 2020 objectives? Looking at this, students will go, oh my gosh, there's like, what is this SDOH3? All of this different stuff. It looks a little intimidating to me. And then we get to this place now where we're really looking intensively at, what is the evidence that certain things work? And again, in a normal situation, I might see their eyes glaze over because it is somewhat overwhelming. This is a database. And of course, for us as educators, we see this database and we're like, yeah, look at all of this stuff, but they don't. They look at this and go, oh my goodness, I don't know what she wants from this is very overwhelming. And again, in a traditional way, I might say to them, go to economic stability and find, this. What is an example of, income? Find something that has a lot of evidence that it works and it addresses this. But I didn't say that to them. Again, I said, hey, go in here and, I know I need for you to understand these 6 factors, and I need for you to understand, the objectives. So here's a worksheet, give me an example from all 6 that you thought was interesting. And it's the same process. Why was it interesting? What did you learn? Who would need this information? What do you want to know even more about now? And what do you not care about? Because we're trying to reduce, push away those things that may not be interesting to you, because how do I get you interested in this subject matter? So these 2 work together, where it was a starting point of give me an objective from each of the 6 social determinants, and then how do these connect into utilizing this search engine? So looking at how I can effectively use the criteria, the objectives, and then going into here and digging a little bit deeper. But let me show you. If I click on one of these links, and we'll try to find one that's a little bit more current here and could perhaps be slightly overwhelming when you first look at it. And we'll go after this one here. So I open that and look, there's even more, you know, there's like the full resource and the strength of evidence. And you know, you would think that it would be the opposite, that if I went in and I was safe and I said, here's this, tell me specifically about this, you would think that that was, you know, the better thing to do. It was not. It was not at all. For me going in and saying to them, hey, just get lost, click around in all of this stuff, find out what you need. That was the better way to sort of get them to understand what they were interested in and have them search for those things. And this also helped with just those general skills of navigation in a website, and not to be afraid to like go down, you know, that rabbit hole of digging more and going deeper into things. And so that as we came back, and that's, you know, how wonderful. I've just had my 17-year-old interrupt me while I'm doing this. I think we can all relate to that. You know, the question, of course, then is, you know, did this work, Debbie? I think it did. I had 6 students. I'm going to come back to that. I had 6 students. 5 got A's, 1 got a B. At the very end, I said, hey, what do you think about this? And anecdotally, they said, this was great. We liked it. We were afraid in the beginning because we are not used to this, but yeah, we got a lot out of this. And so I want to circle a little bit back to the fact that there were 6 students registered in the course. And I know I probably have some faculty saying, well, hey, I have 25. You know, I have 30, and I feel for you. I do, because that is challenging. But my answer to you is, that's just a matter of you setting it up in a way that you can manage those students. I think that a lot of us, just from having to do that, you know, we rise to the occasion and we do that. But again, I use the term classroom management. That's you just figuring out a way to set things up so that you are able to provide them with that, you know, what we're talking about here, which is give them free rein, let them really open up and take a look at things, and you know, feel that sense of control restored. So before I switch gears, and I see that there's some things in the chat, and I'm going to come back to that. But for those of you who, you know, are thinking about, well, you know, you did this remotely, how do I make this happen in an online course? This is, you know, my shameless plug for the second in the series that's coming in the summer, but it's video. It's important to tell the students who you are, and what I'm going to talk about in the next, the upcoming webinar is the idea of social presence. But thinking about ways that you can calm the anxiety, because they are going to be accustomed to being led. I think one of the ways that you can really do that is through video that conveys who you are, and for them not to be afraid of, you know, doing this sort of self-directed, very broad way of looking at, you know, this course, what they want to get out of this course. So I'm going to come back, I'm going to answer some questions, but if you have questions for me about any of this, because public health wasn't the only course that I did sort of this very open, broad approach that gave them control. And I am, now that I'm going into the spring term, I've started to do even more of it in other courses like human sexuality and nutrition. Yes, they're all health courses, but again, I think some of them are a bit more like in the social sciences than in the more traditional science math type of the way that public health, it sort of aligns a little bit more with those subjects. So I am going to turn my video back on. And it looks like I have some questions in the chat. So you do a single breakout room for each individual student. Yep. And I like Zoom because it's pretty straightforward how to create those breakout rooms without being too much of a Microsoft hater. At the college, I also have access to Teams, but I find that it is far more tedious to do the single breakout room. It's not as easy to navigate for the student or for me to set it up. So yes, ahead of time, I set up some single breakout rooms for each individual student. I had a stress management class that had more students in it last semester, and times that I set up 15 breakout rooms. And again, I think that this is just sort of like planning ahead. How am I going to manage kind of maneuvering around in these different breakout rooms to help students? But I always gave them a heads up. I would say, look, you're working on this stuff and you're going to have, in this particular situation, 2 minutes of my time. Think about how you want to use those 2 minutes. So they sort of had, the heads up of when they would go into those rooms. Yes, I can email the presentation to you. The other part I am going to leave to Wendy to answer because I am not sure. But
yeah, no, we don't have CUs. We're not set up for that. And we don't issue them. We have discussed about doing some kind of certificate, but right now we don't have the capabilities or the bandwidth, so to speak, to put out any kind of certificate that we'd have to get it verified. And so I apologize, but I did a private chat to Kathy. I am happy to verify at any point if anybody wants an email verification, as long as I can see your name and face. I can let them know. I can definitely let them know you registered, but I can't say for sure that you all, did anything. I'm not certified or qualified to do that, but thanks for asking. It is a good question, and maybe in the future.
All right, so I'm going to open it up to other questions. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, I'm happy to answer them now. If you want to type them into the chat, I can answer them that way as well. I know I'm very thorough. But does anybody have questions? Everybody is tuned out, right?
Well, Deb, I'll ask you just one quick one. Actually, I had two, and you wound up answering the one, which was that you did ask the students, and at least anecdotally, but do you know if any of your colleagues or anyone else is using this in any other field besides public health, and or if any anecdotes about that?
Well, and I have some colleagues on in this room right now, so feel free to pipe in. My guess is, to some degree, yes. I think that there are, it sort of works a bit in a spectrum, I suppose, of like being very prescriptive to be very open-ended in the way that I have been. And so my guess is that probably a lot of folks on this particular webinar fall somewhere within that spectrum, within their subject matter, that they give a bit more for students to just sort of pursue what they're interested in. And it looks, there may be another question in chat. There's 3.
Yeah, can you see that?
I'm gonna move over. I'm used to having a bunch of screens and I'm on one screen.
I can read them to you if that's easier.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
So Bridget was asking, do you know anyone using this with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra?
I do not. I do not have any experience with that particular product. Okay. But if others do that are in this classroom, feel free to exchange, or the webinar, feel free to exchange your information.
Or even put it in, just, put it in the chat if you have any comments. Denise asked if you were requiring the students to be on video, and were the sessions recorded?
So yes, sort of. No, that's not a great answer. So I did not record my sessions. It just happened that I didn't have any students who required accommodations. At that point, I would have, considered doing it. I told them that they could audio record me. That was fine. They didn't need my permission, but I did not. And it was okay. It turned out okay. They didn't really need to have that source to refer back to. And then so videoing, and then what was the first part of the question too? Oh, staying on camera. So what I would say to them is, yeah, I want to be able to see you, but if you have some concerns or whatever, just talk to me. And then it's as the semester went through, it sort of got a little bit more lenient with like maybe just seeing the top of your head. And it was kind of funny because at certain times where it was discussion, and a student was like, I could only see the top of their head. I would say, now I don't know if that's really you talking. Come on, let's see your face. I would say that in a larger class, I would be more inclined to allow them to self-regulate, but I would tell them, hey, if I can't see you, I might just call on you. So, you need to be paying attention, be ready for that.
Well, that actually is a good segue into the next question from C. Williamson, which is, how would you handle students who are in an asynchronous course?
So in terms of specifically, how would I handle sort of like what specifically in asynchronous?
Hi, this is Carol.
Hi.
I just am, you talk a lot about, courses that you can do synchronously or do, while they're actually on Teams or something during the class time. But for, an online 7-5 or whatever you all call them, a fully online course where they're asynchronous, are there any of these strategies? Because obviously they still might be upset about not having a face-to-face class as well. Yes. Depending on the delivery method the college has chosen for that course. I'm just wondering if you have strategies that would be more applicable to an asynchronous course as opposed to a synchronous, hybrid course.
Yes. So one of the things that I will do, because this upcoming spring semester, I just made the decision that all of my classes were going to be online. And what I did in the fall, and I will likely do again, is from the get-go, I have them fill out just sort of this not graded question. Did you want to take this course in the classroom? What are your concerns? How can I help you through this? What do you think you're going to need? And that opens up the conversation of, hey, you put this, let's schedule an individual office hour meeting. I also keep my office hours very open-ended because, I might have Monday 12 to 1, and if you're at work or whatever, you can't meet with me. So let's set up a time that works for you and talk through some of your concerns. I think it sets the tone for them of, you get it. They probably did not want to do it this way. So, how can we address this? And then in terms of the actual, instruction, that's where I'm very much, and I really do stress that you need to have these videos, chunking them, they lose attention after 5 minutes, that explain to them, here's the open-ended, I'm going to navigate through this screen, I'm going to show you this website, but as I'm going through it, I'm constantly saying, pick this, do this. So trying to convey to them that that's the goal. The goal is for you to guide what you want to know, not for me to tell you, do this, do this, do this. And so I think it's the blend of you being able to convey your personality and also convey what the objective is from, like the curriculum perspective. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I like the idea of having it's time consuming and it goes above and beyond normal office hours, but to have
Yes.
more office hours to accommodate all of the student questions is probably well worth it.
Yes, it does. And, that is the one thing, right? We've all had our conversations with our colleagues that moving to this particular format was a huge lift, and it continues to be a huge lift. We're creating content in a way that our content is created when we're in the classroom live. We are having to be more open to, the student needs. It's always nice when you get the email from the student unprompted that they really appreciate it and could tell, the level of effort, that you put into this. But, on my end of things, what I always say and what I try to impress upon the powers that be is that when you're teaching online, you're teaching remotely to a certain extent, every student becomes their class, right? You can't assess in real time. So what are you going to do? You have to do it in other ways. It's very time intensive. Other questions? Yes. Hey,
Hi.
Melissa.
Hey, Deb. My question is, how much time did you spend on information literacy? Did you have an embedded librarian? Because, sourcing is so important and that sort of crosses over all subjects. So how did you tackle that?
So some of it is inherent to our subject matter because you don't necessarily get a chance to find not credible sources. But in terms of being able to write an essay, we did APA, know how to properly cite. That was something that I gave them a lot of resources, sort of side resources. But then when we met individually, sometimes I would say to them, this is your time to ask me these questions about your writing. I would have them do some writing ahead of time, submit it to me. And then in those individual sessions, we talk through, how can you rephrase this? Okay, if this is information, because a big part of it is giving credit to your source. And so, if this is something that you needed to look up, in order to find the answer, chances are the general public would too, and you have to give properly cite. And so in a sense, it almost kind of worked better to be able to work with them one-on-one in real time for some of those information literacy type of subjects that we know that they can struggle with. But again, in terms of being able to find information that's credible and reliable, it was in the case of public health, we always use those databases. And so they would know, we didn't look outside of that information in order to, locate what we needed.
Thank you.
Other questions? Let's see here. I'm going to go in to.
These are all really, really good questions. And Denise did follow up and make a point about the privacy laws. And I just, it's just in the chat to reaffirm that, yes, there are, I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm assuming a lot of these institutions are almost going to build that in, a privacy waiver or something, because of so much change with the remote shift.
Yes, and not to kind of move totally away from this, but Maryland, we have our own set of privacy laws as they pertain to video recording. And there's a term that they use, but basically what it says is, everybody has to agree that this is okay. And I think that the point where, it sort of becomes all right, how do we do this, is if you do have a student who has accommodations, that they can record. And at that point, I just encourage you, to work with your DSS on campus and try to find, what's a good way for us to help this student. Other questions?
I think you did a fantastic job, Deb. And thank you so much for offering, Deb has her contact information on the screen. And if you miss it for some reason and just want to reach back out to me, I can forward any questions. Deb, you said you would send, if you send me the presentation, I'll send that out, as well as the link to the Maryland Online YouTube channel that will have a recording. It will take me a day or so to get it up there to process it. But if you're registered, if you're here, you're registered. And if you're registered, you'll get all of that information. So thank you very much. And everyone have a good rest of your day, and we'll send information soon.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks.